The AIBD-OH Society meeting, House Styles, Arts and Crafts. So, I'm Jim Wright. For anybody that doesn't know me, I can't imagine
Is the camera
welcome. Some of the basics before we get started. Everybody knows where the restrooms are outside the door. This is very informal. Come and go as you want or need. And please stop me and ask questions as we're going through things. Don't wait till the end of this. So, getting started. First thing is the educational initiative, and I just want to touch on this again. We talked about it a year ago. The idea is to bring education to our membership, things that are very specific for our businesses and things we need to know to improve our businesses and to help us each achieve success however we define that. So the education initiative has three legs, if you will. The first is business. We haven't really done much of that yet. Some of that you're going to see in a blog coming out in the marketing with the new website blog. Obviously, business practice, things we need to talk about there. And also the final leg is design, which is what we concentrated on last year, this year, with some design programs to share some of that knowledge. This seminar is going to cover the arts and crafts style, its history, the forms of expression, and some of the details that we can use to create that style. The goal of the seminar is to have you be able to take away a little bit of knowledge that you can use in your business, that you can use on the next project you've got that wants to be an arts and crafts style. And also to allow you to be able to start your own research when you need to go a little farther with something. How do we define architectural styles? There's a lot of publications. I mean, we all have, I think we all have certain styles in our head, and when somebody says craftsman, or they say country French, or they say colonial, you have something that pops in your head in a file you go to for those details. Field Guide to American Homes, Virginia and Lee McAllister. I hope everybody has that in their office because it's a great technical guide with a lot of photographs that when somebody says, I want this style, you can be very specific about what that style is. Another product I use, another book I use is American House Styles, and we'll show you some of that before as we get into this a little bit. But it takes a basic square box and modifies both the exterior and the floor plan for each individual style. So you can see what things you need to do to help achieve that style as a derivative of that original box. Time period for the arts and crafts style is 1890 to 1930. And arts and crafts was an ideology that really evolved into a movement. It started as a backlash to the industrialization that happened in the mid-1800s. You had the machines that came in and started mass producing product that was previously handmade. And that was a great thing at the time. It's kind of like the technological revolution we've had over the last 20 years. The backlash to that is some of us want to be low tech because we don't like it. There are aspects of all of our lives we prefer to keep low tech as opposed to going high tech stuff. It's the same sort of thought process if you put yourself back 150 years that people were going through then. The loss of craftsmanship, the loss of hand-drawn stuff, the whole idea that working in a factory was bad for people. And so this ideology developed, and it became a movement, and out of that grew what's called the arts and crafts style. And it started in Great Britain. And the style really comes down to three separate, distinct architectural styles. The first is English arts and crafts. And we'll go through that in a little more detail. American Craftsman, and then something called Storybook style. So we'll get into each of those a little more individually. Here's the American house styles comparison I was telling you about. On the left, you've got a basic Georgian house, and we went through that a lot a year ago. But, you know, it's the rectangular box, 2 stories, pretty straightforward. We go to the American Craftsman style is to the right, and you can see how that starts to change. You've got a lower pitched roof. It's a gable or a clip tip, as this shows. The chimney's no longer out on the ends of the building, it's moved interior. And you've got a lot more porches and outdoor living space. You've got a lot of structure exposed, a lot of arbor around there, which really extends it out into nature a little more. And William Morris has become the head or the leader of the arts and crafts movement. In 1859, he had an architect by the name of Philip Webb design a house for him, and it's known as Red House. And it's kind of the basis for the arts and crafts, English arts and crafts house style. It seems to be the first. The movement basically, John Ruskin wrote a lot about the whole idea of craftsmanship and bringing it back. And William Morris kind of took the lead on it and became the figurehead. And Morris actually went a lot further with it, and it became almost a socialism thing. William Morris and Company is famous for the wallpapers that they made. They were in business up through 1940, and that's a sample of wallpaper in the background there. But it evolved because of this house and because of the styles into more of the English arts and crafts. English arts and crafts is really a throwback to the medieval styles. The guilds, craft guilds that were part of the mid-ages, and the handmade look of the houses. And that's what English arts and crafts was trying to bring back. So you see a couple of examples on the top, and those are very medieval looking. You've got the cantilevers on the top left. You've got these cantilevers around here, and that's very much a medieval detail. You've got the chimneys, the chimney here, and you've got the double gables here, and a gable here, slate roof, and they're all stone. That's typical for the formal styles, and then the cottages, the farm cottages and so forth, ended up with the thatched roofs. But that's kind of the medieval style. The overhang is something that's very similar to what you see in Salem, and some of the first homes were built in this country. Here's some more examples. A lot of architects that you may be familiar with were part of this style. Edwin Lutyens, who's considered the English Frank Lloyd Wright, did a lot of work in the arts and crafts style. The house on the left by M.H. Bailey Scott, who's again a famous English architect. CFA of Boise, he did a lot of incredible stuff. A lot of it with white stucco and details, and to me, it's some of the best looking arts and crafts stuff out there. But you can see how it kind of grows out of the ground. And it's lower eaves in most cases, and things come down to the ground, and it feels very organic. And arts and crafts is very different from Tudor, and it's very different from the Elizabethan houses. What we're used to calling Tudor is the stucco second story with what we'll call Tudor boards on it. And that's not Tudor. It's Elizabethan half timber, and some of those so-called Tudor boards are actually part of the arts and crafts style also. The early arts and crafts, because it's a medieval detail. True Tudor typically has parapet walls on the front of the gables, and we Americanize a lot of things, and it's not quite the actual style. But arts and crafts, unfortunately, is not a style that's real easy to point to and say that's what it is. It gets called European, it gets called English country, it gets called a lot of things because it wasn't a strict style that one person developed, and like Frank Lloyd Wright, the prairie style. It isn't a strict style like that. So it's a little hard to define, but I hope visually you start to see and recognize some of the parts that are with it. This gable detail right here, which is called the jerkin head gable, is very common. Chimneys are predominant, obviously. Big reverse gables on the face. Hip roof for the main house. And then typically entries are downplayed. You know, there's an entry there that's fairly straightforward, but you know, the entry is hidden here, and it's someplace up in here. So entries are not, you know, we do a lot of homes where entry is all about street appearance, and everybody's got to know, look, I've arrived. And you know, when you talk about English country, the entry is much less important. When you talk about English country arts and crafts. So here's some examples of English arts and crafts. The building at the top is one that Andy Mellaragno could talk about more, but he chose to go to an Indian guy's thing today instead of being here, which I will never let him get over, because he promised to help me with this. So that's one of his houses, and that's a house that I bugged him for years to participate in the design competition, national design competition, and we finally entered one, and he entered that, and he won everything. You know, so it's an incredible house, painted brick and stucco, but you can see the details of the house are just phenomenal. He did a wonderful job. The other two houses there are actually from our walking tour, thanks to Mike, of Shands Park, which is, I know it's not Dayton proper, it's
Oakwood.
Oakwood. Okay, I got that wrong, I'm sorry.
It's okay, Dayton's close.
But you can see the stuff that starts to make this, you know, you get the Tudor boards here, if you want to call them that. The half timbering is the correct term. You've got a board here that's, it's not quite straight, it kind of goes up a little bit and back down. You've got a dormer that grows out of the roof here. You've got an entry that's sort of hidden over here, and another back entry. Even around the back, you've got the timbering. Here, this is again arts and crafts style, but it's more of a California version of it. It's in the same area, but you can see it expresses the arbor, the taper to these columns. You know, the chimney is predominant, and but it's, again, it's more of a California arts and crafts style. But it's all mixed in the same tool. The house at the top there is one of many stock and stone architects have done. They're a local architectural firm, a couple really, really talented guys, and their style is basically English arts and crafts. And everything they do is, not everything, but many things they do are in that style, and they do it very, very well. So this is part of a small subdivision. It's kind of patio homes, you know, zero lot line stuff. And you can see the entry, while important and visual, is not the biggest thing there. It's not a huge look at me entry. But it's a big front gable, you know, it's part of what you're doing. The house on the right then is one we did many, 7, 8, 10 years ago. Again, in a small patio home development, but kind of arts and crafts, maybe a little toward the contemporary tweak on it, but tapered front entry, stone, and the big gables on the face. Shingles are very common in this style, although it's not shingle style because it's not covered entirely or mostly with shingles. Here again, you've got top left, another one of Andy's designs, and it's the gables on the front. You've got the nice little false vent details. Andy uses a lot of the tile, and it just gives it a real nice organic feel. And then it's got a little porch there with the porch brush that wraps into the top of the column and the paper. Upper right is a Bexley home that is one that's straight out of a plan book. We ran into that when we were out there on another job, and I took a picture of it. And I came back and I knew exactly where it was in the plan book. It's interesting to see something that's been there most of 100 years that came from the plan book. But it's arts and crafts. You got a little eyebrow over the front entry. You got a big chimney on the front. You got a big gable there. And then the Cincinnati Homerama house, and Paul or Mike, you may know who did that. I don't recall right offhand. It's a picture I took. I didn't have a chance to look it up. But
yeah, they can break houses.
yeah, but it wasn't one of yours, right?
No.
Okay. But again, arts and crafts, that one got a little turret in it. A little late-sided turret, which is nice. Or maybe it's round, I can't tell. It's predominant chimney, lots of detail. Chimney caps, steps, goes from stone to brick. Anybody know why it's brick on the top and stone on the bottom?
The stone's organic and natural.
There's also practical reasons.
Wait, it's easier to put the bricks up
Yeah,
high.
it's easier to carry the bricks up the scaffolding than it is big chunks of stone. So that's why you'll see in those older buildings, they went to stone, went to brick in the upper portions. So, and you also notice in a stone building, the base of the walls are the big stones. And as you go up the wall, the stones get smaller. Just practical. It's easier to lift a smaller stone. Here's some more stuff. The one on the left's one we did. And again, it's a big chimney feature. Limestone shoulders on the chimney that are actually have a crown as part of the detail. And then the brick on the top. A little bit of that cantilever at the top of the gable. Brackets. A little board and batten, which again is kind of that medieval sort of look. And then on the right, you've got Moore Craig, which is one of CFA Boise's most well-known homes. And then down below, you've got a home from Florida that was designed by a local architect, and I cannot remember his name, I apologize, but it's got a lot of that same feel. You know, it kind of grows from the ground, and it's got a lot of that band of windows and the arbor across there, and it's got a great feel to it. This is one of our design sketches. And again, it's the arts and crafts details. You got the big gables on the front with the steep pitches. You got a hip roof that dies into those. Some dormers. You got a little bit of that diamond glass, which again is a very medieval treatment. You don't want to do it every place, but put the diamond grill in a smaller window and it gives it a little bit of that flavor. Stone, of course, we're always fighting getting enough stone on the house. You know, the builders want to typically keep it marked, no offense, Mark. You know, for a cost standpoint, you're always trying to keep the amount of stone down because stucco is a lot cheaper. So, and then one of the things we'll talk about a little more is later is these eave details, because they really help make that whole thing work, and they're actually either stucco or limestone put in place to help give it that corbelled feel without actually being able to corbel. With stucco and synthetic products, you can't actually do the corbels. Here again are some more ideas. The one on the left is just something I picked out of Google Images, but it is very much that English arts and crafts. Top right, again, Stockton Architects. You can't get much more of an English look than that, with the double gable, you know, great detail with that bay and the scupper and downspout that comes down to the top of it. Entries downplayed, and a huge taper chimney is part of that. But, you know, main house, main body's hipped, and then the gables come off of it. And then this is, the one below is another sketch we've done, finished the house plans, but you've got a house with a 2-car side load and then a 1.5 car garage that sits back, and trying to keep the flavor of that garage matching the house, while at the same time trying to maximize the roof pitch. You know, we can't go above 17 feet, and it can't be bigger than such and such. And so you try to do that and get some detail on it instead of just doing a simple, you know, garage. And that's actually set up to be done with trusses so that you can get that detail by just falsing in the front gable and bringing a little cantilever out from the entry roof on a garage, and it turns into something that looks halfway decent. The chimney in this plan in the front is totally false. It's there for appearance only. Inside, it's a closet on the first floor, and it's nothing above. So, but it's something the client wanted, the red brick on the front of the house in some sort of accent, and they were happy with that. The pictures they showed me were from Old Arlington of houses they liked, and a lot of Old Arlington here in town is built in the 1920s, and it's a lot of arts and crafts houses, a lot of European influenced houses. And that's something we should probably talk about too, is why that time period for the European stuff to come over here. First World War, we sent hundreds of thousands of men over to Europe to fight that, and they came back. And when they did, there was interest in European stuff, where we had been strictly about America before that, and our own stuff, we got exposed to a bigger world. So as some of those folks started to get money, and as the publications started to put stuff out there, this style became interesting to folks that had enough money to build a house like that. So, and we had a period then, just like we went through from 95 to 2005 of a boom during the 20s, and a lot of homes were built. So it became a predominant style. And today we're trying to pick up what we did almost 100 years ago and duplicate it in a revival manner. Here's more of Andy's work. And you can see he's an expert at this. He's done some incredible stuff. The top house is one that's built in an area called the Oaks, north of town here, north of Dublin. And it's a beautiful massing. You've got two-car garages, but they're totally different elements. They look like separate parts of the building. And it just, you know, this garage on the right, you've got an eyebrow dormer, and then you've got one window, and the window's offset. And it just looks like a house that grew and developed over time. It was an outbuilding, somebody turned it into a garage. It got attached to the rest of the house, and then the whole story that goes with developing that stuff. But you've got, you know, around the entry, you've got a beautiful round top door with a round window in it. You've got the staggered limestone pieces around the entry, the tooth into the brick, which is again a very Old English sort of detail. The diminutive entry, the half timbering. You've got the bird holes in the end of the front gable on the left garage. And of course, you know, when we call them bird holes, they were vents. They were designed as vents originally 100 years ago. And they were called bird holes because the birds all built nests in them. And people quit using them for that reason. So we went to all the other things we used over the ensuing century. And now we go back to those, but we don't make them available for the birds to use. We do a cutout piece of plywood, and you paint another piece black and put it on the back side, so it has a depth to it, but critters can't build it, birds can't build it. So, but you build it off the wall, put some brackets underneath it, and it gives it a real nice three-dimensional detail on those two big gables to really help with giving the authenticity to the house. I think the gable on the right over the main entrance actually has scrolled siding in it too, and that's a hand split edge on the siding. I don't know if you've ever seen that in your homes. I know students have. I've seen it on their homes. It's fairly expensive. Scrolled is the correct term, isn't it?
Right.
Yeah. Yeah. Bottom right is a design Danny did. I don't know that this house was ever built, but it's a great example of an English cottage. You know, it doesn't look huge, but I'm sure it's every bit of 2,800 square feet. Got the garage on the left, wonderful detail in the garage where you've got a tapered battered wall is the correct term, where the stone is battered back. If it was real stone, it's laid and stepped back so it can be self-supported. And that's called battering. So you've got that on the garage, and wonderful scuppers and downspouts, and then that big round window is just an accent. Instead of having something more vertical, it sets it apart again as a separate structure. Got the eyebrow over the main roof, that's probably a dining room. And then you've got, again, the down plate entry. And it's really neat because you've got an entry that's the width of the door, but the arch is a door and a window. So you walk in, it's got a little half wall and a cap next to it. It's part of that porch. It's just a wonderful intimate sense to the porch and the entry that you don't get out of a lot of the bigger houses we're doing now. And then, of course, the transom windows help give it a lot of punch. And again, on that diamond window, if you can see easily enough, this window up here is probably a false window. It's got a diamond grill in it, and it's got the staggered keystones all the way around it. And that English detail is very much what makes it. Of course, he's put finials on it too, which always look good in the picture. Nobody ever spends the money for it. Have you guys ever had anybody put finials on a house? Occasionally? Have you? Great. We'll have to talk about where we source those. But then this is Andy's personal house. He bought a ranch that was on this house, a little 50s ranch, and he and his wife lived in it for about 3 or 4 years. And then they built this house on the site behind the ranch and tore the ranch down. They're in Arlington. I mean, he was fortunate to find a site like that. And it's just an awesome house. So I've got interior photos here too. And then you get great columns on the front. You've got the battered walls on the study in the front, or I think it's a study. Yeah. Overhangs. I mean, look at his downspouts in front of the columns. You know what those are?
Chains.
There's chains. It's just wonderful details throughout. Eyebrow. The windows are very Craftsman. But this house is arts and crafts. Again, you look at the front gable on the left, and that barge board that goes across there is tapered on the top. It has a cap on it. And so it becomes structural looking, as if it were structural beam. So just really, really nice details. Can't say enough good stuff done. In the entry also, we'll look at that a little closer. Here's some column stuff. One of the things that in my mind makes or breaks arts and crafts or the Craftsman style is the columns. I think we've probably all seen houses where the columns are just wrong. They're too fat, they're too tapered, the pier's too high or too low. There isn't much about this style that's massing in proportion and scale, but the columns are. We talked about it last year. Proportion is similar to music. You've got fifths and thirds. And if you do stuff in fifths and thirds, or some portion of that, it starts to feel right. You know, both of these columns, I've got a 2/3 or 2/5 base and a 3/5 wood column. And it just starts to feel right. The taper usually is about 1.5 to 2 degrees. I've got a taper on this left here that's 4 degrees, and it almost feels like it's too much to me. So you have to get these columns right in order to have the style look good, particularly in American crafts. Any questions on columns or any discussion on that? Come on, you guys gotta have some questions. American Craftsman style. Turn of the century, we had the shingle style on the East Coast, and we had the arts and crafts influence from England. We had Asian influences, and we had, actually I'm told, Swiss chalet influences came in too. And you have what's considered the poster child for American Craftsman homes, and that's the Gamble House in Pasadena, done by Green & Green Architects. And they did a lot of work out there. They were in business, I think, about 30 years, and really started the style that's known as American Craftsman. And at that time, California was just starting to grow. They had a population explosion. Everybody was moving to California, and that style became uniquely California. And so that's why you see all the way up and down the West Coast a lot of the Craftsman style in a lot of those towns that were developed in that time frame. It's one of the reasons I'm excited about going to Pasadena. You've got a lot of opportunity to see authentic Craftsman style and take some good pictures and details. Again, very organic. This has a lot of shingles on it because that was part of that influence that was brought over from the shingle style that was going on the East Coast that was popular there. Chimneys predominant in the middle, a lot of structure, a lot of arbor, you know, all the big overhangs, low pitched roofs. Classic American Craftsman.
Jim, will we be touring that house as part of the convention?
I certainly hope so. I don't know.
If not, we'll make it.
I will be touring it, whether it's on the convention tour or not. But I wouldn't think you would go with Pat to Pasadena without touring it.
Exactly.
So, and hopefully a behind-the-scenes tour.
Is that like going to Memphis and not going to Graceland? Or?
No.
You know, I went to Memphis and did not go to Graceland, and I don't feel I missed anything. My family went to Graceland.
Fair enough.
What's the Jungle Room?
Mm.
Yeah.
The front gate is a no.
It looks like
Yeah. American Craftsman. We see it. It's one of those styles that has just had a life of its own. And it's been used and used and used. Two examples from Grandview, Ohio. Upper left and center bottom are the same house, just a side view of the center bottom. You see the battered columns. You see the structure of the house. You know, the timbering. You see brackets on the gable ends. The columns are a real rough stone. They didn't try to lay them all uniform. They jut out here and there, and it gives it a very rustic look and a very organic look. Great house, you know. Big overhangs, not a low-pitched roof, but in Grandview at this time, people were using third floors. They were more than storage, so people were doing third floors. You know, on the bottom, that's a screen porch. And I can't tell you if it's original to the house or not, but it certainly feels like it is. It's certainly been there for quite a while. It's not a new addition. So I suspect the garage back there is a new addition, but it blends well. Top right, that's a nice wood frame example. You've got, you know, what was designed as a porch look and just a little entry there, but then you've got this pop-out piece that's part of the front room. It's just a great detail to the house, and you've got bands that show where the floors are, painted a different color. And again, it's a very simple house, but it's got a lot of elegant detail and proportion to it. Very vertical, pulled out of the ground, half the basement's out of the ground, but just a lot of real nice details. Again, this is one we did a couple of years ago for a builder's personal house. Bottom right is what we started with. Basic 1962 story, ugly. I mean, you know, he bought it for the land. It was a nice piece of property. And he gutted the house, and then he called me and said, "Can we do something with this?" After he gutted the entire thing. And I said, "Yeah, I mean, it's kind of, you look at the bottom house, what can we do with it?" "Well, certainly colonial will go on it easily. You know, we can do something else with it. What do you have in mind?" He said, "Well, my wife and I have always really liked the Craftsman style stuff. Do you think we can do that with it?" So I said, "Sure, we'll come up with something." So we took the garage closest to the entry and turned that into the laundry room. Put the gable there and a little planter outside the window. And then we turned the gable on the front and added on, took the second floor out over the rest of those two-car bays, and He actually ended up removing the entire roof and putting a new roof on it because he had some mold on the underside of the plywood. So in the process, he did the kicked eaves on the main house, and which is really kind of a neat detail. We've got some shingle in that center gable. Also at the top, we've got a board and batten look, which gives you a different width, a varying width across there. It gives it a rich texture. And then we've got the siding. My original drawings for this showed siding that was not equally spaced. You'd have a couple that were wide and then a narrow space, wide, narrow. What I am told is called AB siding, where you get different spacing on the siding. And again, that's very much an arts and crafts, American craftsman sort of ethos. So, and I think in this picture, he didn't have glass in the lantern yet, it's on the garage. But he's been very happy with the house, and his wife's thrilled with it. I think the columns work pretty well on here. They might be a little excessively tapered, but those are not the columns I put on the plan. Those are the ones he decided to do himself in the field.
They look a lot better than the ones that were on it when you started.
I'm sure they do. Thank you, Mike. But, I mean, most of you have never had a builder freelance any details there.
Never, no.
Again, Mark, I apologize. But you do your own design, so you're able to freelance, right? You know, we put a little metal roof on that little piece in the front and on the front porch. It was brick, and we kept that brick on the wall there, but the house turned out pretty nice. He did have, I think, his cost almost $500,000 in it, so he didn't spare any dollars. Here's some houses from different places we visited. Top left house, that's a house from Kansas City that we saw. We took a tour of homes there. It was down a private street with a park in the center. And this was one of the houses that was on the tour. And it was a terrific house. Just the proportions and everything were great. You get this great big overhanging porch, probably 4 or 5 foot overhangs in that porch, and huge Doric columns. They were like, you couldn't hardly get your hands around them. And Doric column, they just came right down to the ground, no base for them at all, and then a nice square capitol at the top. You got a really interesting dormer on there, which I'll show you in some more detail later. You know, really wide double hung windows. Those are probably 4 foot wide, and every book is 5.5 feet tall. And again, American Craftsman, you see the grills in the top half of the windows only. So, stone in the bottom, stucco on the top, heavy band board, brackets on the dormers, brackets on the, you can't see them so well on the porch. Again, structure exposed, structure really celebrated with these houses. House at the top right is an American four-square house. An American four-square, like bungalow, is a building style, not a design style. It's a building type. American four-square is a building type. You can see American four-square houses that are craftsmen, that are arts and crafts, that are colonial. You can put a lot of different finishes on that, but it's an American four-square. It's interesting that the porch on this is not centered on that front gable. It's offset to the right. But it's a great porch, and it's got nice battered columns on it that go all the way up to the heavy porch breast that goes around. Big overhangs. Just has a great look to it. And I love the red color.
Is that a newer home or an older home?
It's an older home. That's from our tour in Chance Park.
Okay.
Yeah, I remember.
I don't think you were there for that.
Yeah,
Were you?
I don't remember that one.
Yeah. That's when we came across, we went up and around, not down those 2 streets, it was someplace else we started.
It was off the tourist map.
It was off the tourist map, okay. Bottom right is a Homerama house from Indianapolis from probably 03 or 04. I went over there for one of their Homeramas. And it's a huge house, but it's got a lot of nice craftsman details to it. And then the bottom left is one we did in Tartan, up here in Columbus, and it was a little different. Tartan Fields at that time was all first floor master, stucco and stucco stone. And, you know, I got to the point where if I did one more stucco and stucco stone house, I'd just scream. So this builder and I do a lot of stuff together, and he said, what else can we do? I said, well, how about doing a two-story that's a little bit different? And so we did a two-story, and it's got 9-foot first floor, except for the great room and the kitchen, casual dining, and living in the back is 10 feet. So the second floor is actually 2 levels. And we put this detail on it, and it's hard to see, but I got the AB siding on it. And to the right of the entry is shingles on that piece, but the color is the same. There's like a half shade difference between the shingles and the siding, so you get just a little bit of contrast there. And we put the chimney on the front of the den, just to give it a decorative element on the front of the house, and it's been a well-received house. That particular plan we haven't duplicated, but we've done the same house 5 different times with different elevations on it, because people like the plan and it's cost-effective to build. So, and of course, down on the front of the garage, which sticks way out, unfortunately, we put a nice arbor detail over the window, which softens that a little bit. And it doesn't hurt to have some trees on the lot too to help give this soft look. Dormer's false, and the chimney on the front is just a metal firebox, and the chimney all laid up. So, and a little bit of wing wall to kind of stretch the house out and give it a little color at the front. Here's some houses. The bottom right house is a house from City Ramen, and you guys will have to tell me what year that was. 4 or 5?
3, I think.
3. Yeah. Beautiful house you guys did. You want to talk about it? Tell me a little bit about the process, and was it a spec or a floor plan?
It was a spec. There was no plan at the time.
Who designed that? Paul or you?
Mike did.
Oh, Mike did.
Yeah.
Really great details. You know, nice arbor across the front, and it's not very deep. It's maybe 2 feet across the front of the garage.
I don't even think it's 2 feet.
Yeah, and it's you know, by painting the joist, the dark purple color, it really gave it a lot of pop. And then across the front porch, that porch breast is down. You've got the same joist that come out there as exposed rafters, and it's a great detail. But nice front gable. You can see that the brackets, which are essentially just timbers that come out through the gable eave, right?
Right.
Decorative timber pieces.
Right.
Again, they're painted in purple, so they stand out nice. Not a complex house at all. You know, structurally, that looks like a pretty simple house.
It was pretty
Of
straightforward.
course, it's about 4 stories in the back, right?
It's 3 stories in the back.
Yeah.
That was the first year, so they didn't get too crazy.
Oh, okay.
Up on Weedham, it doesn't have.
But great details in the garage doors. You got a couple of carriage house doors. Instead of putting one big gaping door in there, you got 2, which is really nice. You don't have a lot of space in between them, but it breaks it up enough that it feels a little more traditional, and it feels the scale is right for the house.
Yeah, I think it's only about 36 feet wide, the whole house.
Yeah.
Because the lots are really tight.
Nice porch, wonderful columns. Again, you look at those columns, and they feel like they're maybe 1/3, 2/3 on top, and it gives you a great proportion. It really works.
I'm sure Mike worked that out.
Well, you know what? It's odd.
It's easy when he's not here.
You do that for a while, and you work it out, and then it's odd. You know,
Yeah.
I think it ought to be about here. And
Right.
you look at, all right, am I off the ground enough that I have to have a handrail?
Right.
And then does the handrail go into the stone pier, or does it go into whatever you would above? And then you start looking at proportion. I go up, down a little bit, and make
Right.
it work. But subconsciously, you're looking at those proportions to see if they work or not. So.
Some of those you can see are horribly wrong at 50 miles an hour when you're driving down the street.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Oh my God,
Exactly.
the proportions are just that bad.
Exactly. And not all of them are new ones. There's some old ones that are bad too. The other 2 houses that are on there are new Craftsman style houses also. And I got them out of a book called New Arts and Crafts Homes that I have in my library. One at the top right is you know, a lot of shingle on that. Again, very kind of California Craftsman to me, with a lot of shingle. Low pitched roofs, a lot of brackets. You can see in that upper gable, Again, the barge board across there that really defines that structure at the eave line there. And then this one over here is kind of an interesting three-story double dormer sort of thing. Not a big house. Stucco panels on the lower level. Nice window details. Nice entry porch. Really nice waterfall stair that wraps around the corner. But unique, obviously Craftsman. Nice column. You know, the whole column just wood and tapered. But the column's scaled right, so it gives it a little bit of, you know, it would be very easy to make that column too heavy on that corner. And it's just the right size. It almost feels like a pencil point holding it up a little bit. It's kind of neat. And the little windows wrapping the corners give that kind of a nice feel without being, you know, the big tall windows. And they kind of work with the dormers and so forth. So, shingle style in the gables, shingles in the gables. And then, again, on the top left, that's a house from that new Arts and Crafts book I have. And I probably should give proper credit to whoever designed it, but I didn't have a chance to look that up and add to the slide. But a more contemporary treatment. You know, the windows are mixed, the windows are a little different, but yet they all work together. Nice composition on that. May not be your cup of tea, your clients may not like that, but that's a way to bring contemporary to what is a style we've used for years. Mixing materials, mixing colors. You can see on that shed dormer, you've got a window that breaks the material line, which gives it a little energy. On the front gable, you get the barge board that goes across in two places. The top of them is all the way across, and then you got a bracket that goes into the window, just a, you know, a plywood bracket. And then the lower barge board, the middle barge board, doesn't go clear across. It comes across as an underline for that small window, but it doesn't go clear across the gable. So, really interesting treatments. It's not my personal taste, but I thought it was very, very well done. It was a nice composition. So you can go contemporary with this style very easily. The top right is a California bungalow. I think, if I remember correctly, it was from Santa Monica. But again, huge overhangs, flat roof pitch. Maybe that's 312 at the most. Looks like, you know, maybe 4 or 5 foot overhangs, both on the gable and the eaves. And no doubt those beams that come out there, those outriggers, are probably truly structural. But again, to see those painted a different color, just like Studer's project, you know, really a nice accent. You almost feel, because bungalow came after Victorian, you almost feel some of that color scheme transferred into the bungalow, you know, from the Victorians. But it's a nice detail. Bungalow, that term comes from an Indian word called banga, and the first bungalows were built in India, colonial in India, by the English, and that term bungalow kind of derived from that, and it transferred over because it had big overhangs. It's hot, you had a lot of big overhangs, and of course California, that's natural to have big overhangs there. So that's where the whole word bungalow came from, and it's kind of used to describe anything that has huge big overhangs and is not real tall. This is obviously 2-story, but still a bungalow. All the structure exposed. Interesting columns, because you've got a nice brick base, and then you've got separate pieces to that column that have a band around it, almost to the top. And again, that barge, and then you've got on the porch, you've got the joists that come through that element. Bottom right is an infill house we did on a deep ravine. Interesting that the address for the house is actually on the ravine side, not on the street side. So the house opened up in the back, but the challenge was to create a Craftsman style house that blended with the neighborhood. And so we've got some shingle on some of this, and we've got a nice carriage house door, a little arbor over the front, over the garage door to soften that gable on the street. and then the porch in the back where the entry is to the walk. The garage is actually separated from the house because of some zoning requirements. It was easier to separate, and so you stepped out onto the porch, and then you had about that far between the porch and the garage door, so you'd have to go very far to get wet. You would get wet in the rains. Another little false dormer on the roof using some of that shed door racks. And again, the columns, I think the columns work pretty nicely on this one. It's kind of from the porch up is where the proportions are. And again, about 1/3, 2/3. The top house is a house, same builder I did the previous house for, went out to Bexley, and this particular house had a side lot with it on the corner. Almost buildable side lot. And we had to get some variances, but this was the house that was there, and he sold it, did a little bit of work inside of it, it was in pretty good shape. But what a beautiful Craftsman style house, and I took pictures of it when I was out there. Interesting details of the gables. You've got a double piece here that comes out and they're connected. And I'm sure they're all simply decorative. But they've held up well, even though they're proud of the gable rake out there, they've held up well. You get a nice band around here and the corners overlap and stick out. Again, you're celebrating that structure. The windows are wrapped with a back band in addition to the one body. Nice overhangs. It's got half-round gutters. But this all stucco house, and it's got the textured cinder block basement, I guess, because that's what was used then. Just some really nice details. Not a lot of color, but just done really well. Bottom left's a nice bungalow. We see a lot of that wood, that hip, that clipped hip on the front of the bungalow. You can see that in any city you go to. Again, the columns are nice. You've got that off the ground a ways, so the base of the column's a big part. Probably 2/3, 1/3, or 3/5, 2/5 probably, looking at it. But the proportions are right. Again, the brackets on the front, exposed rafter tails. Nice handrail goes from pier to pier. It's very common with these bungalows that the pier on one side of the stair doesn't have the column above it. It just anchors the handrail. And it opens that porch up and gives that big structure across the porch, uninterrupted, a nice look. It opens that porch up and makes it very inviting to people walking along the street. Right-hand picture is just a typical bungalow. Again, it's got that real rough stone column. It's really neat. Little diamond window kind of thrown as an afterthought. It seems to work with it. And then you've got that Swiss chalet treatment in the gable end, where you've got the details. It's almost a Victorian fretwork sort of detail. But it comes into Craftsman because it's not so scrolling. And then the entry gable's just got the vertical spindles in it, which is a nice difference. The rake boards obviously are decorative. You've got some structure right here. You've got something that looks like the end of a beam coming through as an accent. And then you get this little scallop tail on here, which is very decorative. And in California, you'll see a lot of that. This up here, this scallop detail, very unusual for this part of the country. You don't usually see something that decorative around here. Most of them have simple brackets that look like these. There was something somebody could buy and add on to make it Craftsman style. This somebody had to cut. This stuff wasn't off the shelf. Somebody had to take the time to build that and put it together. It's like cutting this. So there's a real nice feel, a nice handmade look to that house. And something on this house that really sticks out to me is the way these corners are done with this water table board across here that creates the water table. It really breaks up. That house would be very plain if that stucco was continuous all the way up to town. This chair rail or water table that goes across here is just fabulous. And I have no idea, something built in the teens, how that wood is held up that long. Somebody's done put a lot of effort into maintaining that over the years. Because typically those little points would be broken off and rotted, and everything was in good shape on this house on the outside. Some updating needs the inside.
Where did you say that house is at?
Up Bexley, which is the east side of town. We had two areas that were developed in the 20s in this town. One was Arlington and one was Bexley on the opposite sides of town. So you go to those two areas and find examples of homes that were built in the 20s. Other areas were developed, but those were where the high-end homes were built in the 20s. So, the third style we're going to cover is storybook style. Storybook is fun. Storybook is something that developed in the 1920s. Again, you had all the servicemen that had been overseas. You had Hollywood starting to take off and become what it is today. Still silent films, but you had a series of very popular films were set in Europe. And it brought the interest, because everybody wanted to see the silent films, it brought the interest for that style of architecture to America. And from there, you had set designers and some, we got another one coming up that will show you a house that was built strictly for a studio and how decorative they got. Storybook style is called Hansel and Gretel style. It's called Hobbit houses. It's called, it's just a quirky, fun style, and it's something people had a lot of fun with. And you think, well, that was only California. No, it wasn't. Because of the movies and because of publications like Ladies' Home Journal that were popular then, this style within 10 years was nationwide. And I got examples here from Arlington, not as extreme. This house is from Shands Park. We were walking around and I just couldn't believe I'd see something like that in Dayton, because I don't have anything like that in Columbus that I know. It's just a great shingle style, storybook style house. Again, you've got these steep pitched hips with a flare at the bottom. You've got this jerkin head piece at the top. And you can see how this ridge kind of sways. That's part of the design. To make it look, the idea was to make it look old. To create something that was very postcard, picturesque, and looked like it'd been there for 100 years. So they did that 100 years ago, and so now it looks like it's been there 200 years. Again, pretty well kept up. We saw some issues with what we're looking at. But, and on the left there is another example of a sketch for a storybook house. Very Disney-esque, very much like something you see in a Disney theme park. It grows out of the ground. Those columns just kind of, it's like the stone was there and it just continued stacking. This house has really interesting slate pattern to the roof because they're all diamond slates on this portion. This portion is all diamond slates. I can't tell what that is, but I would assume it's similar. And then you get this little dove coat back here, little turret, and those were part of the style also. Dove coats are birdhouses. A couple hundred years ago, 300 years ago, medieval times, whatever that was, they raised pigeons for a number of things, not the least of which was using their leftovers as fertilizer. So they built these dove coats and then they shoveled the fertilizer out of them. But the dove coats are round. A lot of them have bird holes up and down, particularly at the top, so the pigeons can fly in and out. So a little turret like that is called a dove coat. It's probably totally non-functional in this house, but it's a decorative piece. There's a lot of things that are really not functional in this house as much as they're just flat and decorative. This whole this whole ridge line is made to look like it's sagging, you know, like it's been there 300 years. And it actually takes a lot of work, doesn't it, Mike, to get that bridge to do that? I have one of yours in here somewhere too. So this is the style that I get excited about because it's a lot of fun. You can do a lot of stuff with this. Here's the house on the left that was built as a building for a movie set, actually for a movie studio. And then it was moved in 1920, I think it was built. 1934 was moved and became a house for someone. But it's called the Witch's House. It's Spandella Cottage or something like that. It's a given name of it. But it's made to look as old and ramshackle as possible. And that's a picture from when it was new. So it's an interesting style. You don't often see examples this extreme, but I'm sure if any of you have been on House or been on the internet, there are a lot of those hobbit houses where you've got a thatch type roof that's done in shingles. And so upper right is another house that's very much storybook style. But again, you know, what's the difference between that house and arts and crafts, English arts and crafts? Well, you know, it's a couple of things. It's the clinker brick in the top of the chimney, where they're using brick and throwing some pieces of stone in, and the stone in the chimney is very much random and kind of haphazard looking. It's the sway in the roof ridge. Another thing you look for is the wavy shingles, and you can see them in the house on the left a little better than they are on the right. But they hand laid the shingles so they had a wave to them, and that's very much storybook style. The house on the bottom two pictures there, that's what appears to be a ranch house is actually 4 stories in the back. It's a home that Gloria Swanson owned at one time. And that turret there is a dovecote. And it's made to look like it's actually a staircase. And according to the book I have, it's simply a closet on both floors. It's not actually a staircase. But that's that dovecote that's added as a detail. So, again, very, very steep pitched roofs in the front gables. But this storybook's got some fun details to it. Upper right is a house. I didn't have a great picture of it. I guess I should have contacted you guys with that picture. This is a house that Studers did in the Homerama of 05. Yeah.